How do I warn a friend without being judgmental? Can I forgive a person without condoning their action? Are morals invented or discovered? How can I grow more moral? What is the meaning of life, and how do I gain happiness? Let's talk about it. Today we will be asking, why study ethics? In this lecture, we're going to ask why study ethics, and we're going to ask, what is ethics? Now, when we ask, why should we study ethics, we got to ask the right questions. But first off, here's some common responses. I learned everything I needed to know as a kid. What my parents taught me was good enough. Simple. I don't need complicated systems. I'll just follow what feels right. We just need to care about other people. Why is ethics so complicated? Just don't harm somebody else. No problem. Well, let's ask some everyday questions to dig a little bit deeper. How do you forgive without condoning the action? How do you warn a friend without being judgmental? How can you recognize your own ethical blind spots? Why do people do the wrong thing? Who is to judge what's right and wrong anyway? Why do people have different political opinions? Let's think about some things. Oftentimes, we see a problem around us and we say, somebody should do something about it. Then we do nothing. We get angry at others, but we excuse ourselves. A good example of this is when you're driving in traffic. We complain about society's problems, but we also say that we have no right to tell people they're wrong. We say everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but we still condemn racists, religious fanatics, Nazis, and other political opponents. So let's ask some difficult questions. Is an action moral because it achieves a good consequence, follows a duty, or expresses a good character trait? If morals are a matter of opinion, how can someone ever feel obligated to do something right? Can't they just change their opinion when it's convenient? Why not? Where does evil come from? We say that things are wrong, that things are evil, that things are bad. Where does it come from? Should I follow my heart or should I follow logic? Sometimes they lead me in different directions. This is what ethics asks. Are there right and wrong ways to pursue happiness? Your gut response to that may be that no, of course, happiness means different things to different people, and whatever works for you, that's fine. But is that really the case? Because sometimes we find our friends or family doing something self-destructive. They think they are doing something good. They think they are pursuing pleasure or happiness. But from the outside, we know that they are spiraling into a bad habit that is not going to lead to happiness. Are there right and wrong ways to pursue happiness? Here's some personal questions. Do you want to be a better person? How much effort should it take? How do you do it? How good should you become? Is there anything wrong with being perfect? If there is, then isn't that perfect? What is perfect? If there's something wrong with being perfect, then something else must be perfect. Something has to be perfect. What is perfect? When I face a difficult decision, how do I know what's right? Is there always a right and wrong answer? How do I convince someone that I'm right? How do I admit that I'm wrong? Here's some more personal questions. Where do you think morals come from? If they come from society, which society? Our society seems to disagree on a lot of things. If morals are from society, then how come we disagree? Even within American society, we have two major political parties and they disagree. Maybe each political party, maybe the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, are two different societies. But even within, say, for example, The Republican Party, there are lots of different opinions. There's lots of different religions represented. Maybe one particular religion is a society. But even within that religion, there's different forms of that religion. There's disagreements within that religion. And down we go. Even within your own family, do you agree with everything that your other family members say is right and wrong? If morals come from society, how big is that society? Is that society one person? Is that society as big as a country? Is it a subculture within society? These are good questions to ask. Can morals come from a society of one? Why or why not? Do the ends justify the means? Doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there. Doesn't matter how you achieve happiness so long as you don't hurt somebody else. It really doesn't matter how you did it. Here's some American ethical debates, just to show you how divisive we are on a lot of different discussions. And the question, is doctor-assisted suicide permissible? The same number of people say yes as say no. What about homosexuality? Is it okay? Slightly more say yes, but not far behind the no's at 43%. Is abortion permissible? 50% say no, and 38% say yes, it is permissible. That's interesting. Very divisive. Why do we disagree so much? Well, we want to self-examine our beliefs about right and wrong. This is why we're studying ethics. This is a goal. Socrates says that the unexamined life is not worth living. Are our beliefs consistent? We want consistent beliefs. We don't want to contradict ourselves. We also want to know if our beliefs are actually going to lead to happiness. Are we blind? Are our beliefs blinding us to the truth? How would we know? If we're blind, then we wouldn't know. Are we humble enough to take the advice of other people? But how do we know if other people have something better to offer, especially if we're blind? Are they reasonable? Are our beliefs reasonable? Are other people's beliefs reasonable? We examine these things. Am I humble and willing to admit that I'm wrong? Another reason to study ethics is to help guide our actions and choices. How do I know what the right choice is? Should I look out mainly for my own interests or the interests of others? How do I balance those things? I look out for number one, which is me, and then other people secondary, maybe as a close second. Or at the end of the day, should I serve other people at my own expense? How do I know when to do either? Which should I consider more? Consequences, duty, or character traits? This is a big deal. Now, do I want to get a certain reward, achieve a certain goal in my life, and anything I do to accomplish that is good? That's a consequence consideration. Or duty. Everybody has a duty to help their neighbor. Everybody has a duty to follow the law. Everybody has a duty to tell the truth. Something like this. Morality is a duty. Or perhaps morality expresses character traits. That person is really loving. Man, that person is so humble. I wish I wasn't as egotistical. Maybe I could learn something from them. I just wish I was more patient with my kids. Patience, humility, love, joy. These are character traits. Another reason to study ethics is to cultivate human flourishing. What does it mean to be happy? This is an ethical question. Is it completely up to my choice, or are there better and worse ways to live? What does it mean to be a good person? How do I grow to be a better person? What does it mean to have a fulfilling life? Not just happiness of fleeting pleasures, but happiness that is really meaningful and expresses human flourishing. Also, we want to help provide a meaningful life. What is the meaning of life? That's a big question. Am I answerable to God or some religious entity? These are ethical questions as well. How do I live a truly valuable life? How do I balance pleasure and hard work? What pleasures are good and which are bad? We want to find what a meaningful life is and guide our actions accordingly. How do I find true happiness? That's the main ethical question. Now, let's just talk about what is ethics and define moral philosophy. What would you do in the following scenario? Here's an apartment complex. Outside the apartment complex, there is a woman being assaulted. She cries, "Help, help, help!" But she's being stabbed. And it seems that nobody picks up the phone to call the police. Nobody comes down to help her. In the investigation that happened afterwards, it seemed that there were a lot of people home, but nobody actually went down to help. And this went on for a long time. Why is that the case? Why did nobody go help? Well, this case is actually the murder of Kitty Genovese. It's a famous example often used in ethics to illustrate what's called the bystander effect. Well, what is the bystander effect? Why did the people in the building do nothing? Well, the bystander effect is a social psychological phenomenon in which individuals are less likely to offer help to a victim when other people are present. Why do people have apathy? Think about this. You're driving along, you see a broken down car on the side of the road and a person standing outside it. Do you stop and help? Or do you think, that's somebody else's problem? When you're sitting in a classroom and the teacher asks a question, do you immediately raise your hand and answer the question? Or do you sit there along with most of the other students silently, waiting for somebody else to answer? If you were in a one-on-one conversation with the instructor and the instructor looks you in the eyes and asks you a question, you're not going to stand there silent for 5 minutes while he stares at you. You're going to answer immediately and continue the conversation, because in a one-on-one conversation, there's no bystander effect. Well, why do people have a bystander effect? Why do people have apathy? They think it's somebody else's problem, or somebody else is probably taking care of it. Bystanders should care about the victim even if they don't know her. This is true. But why? Why should people be moral? Why should bystanders care about the victim, even if they don't know her? Why? Why be moral? Why care? Maybe it is not our problem. Why am I obligated to help? It's just a decent thing to do, somebody might say. Well, decent just means moral, and doesn't really tell me why I should be moral. Why should I be decent? Somebody might say it's good for society to be moral. But why should I care about society? Because you'll feel guilty if you don't. Maybe I won't. And I'll probably get over it. If guilt is just a feeling, then I could feel guilty in the wrong ways. I could have misplaced feelings of guilt. I'll just get over it. Maybe you have a different answer. Here's the crucial question. Why be moral? This is the first question of ethics. Ethics is the study of morals. Morals are individual precepts or rules. Ethics asks, why be moral? What makes an action moral or immoral? Are morals universal and applicable to everyone, or relative to certain groups of people? Are morals real and discovered, in other words, objective, or are they opinions invented by people? That means subjective. Where do morals come from? How do morals relate to values? What is a value anyway? Those are just some of the questions. How do morals relate to values? Well, first we have a value, like, let's say, human life is valuable, all right? Based on those valuables, we reflect on why. Why is that valuable? And we figure out the justification. Once we have the justification, we go back to the values, because perhaps we find that we do not have adequate justification and we need to change our values. Or now, perhaps they are good values, and now that we have justification, we realize that those values are based upon that justification. In other words, we have a good reason to value human life. We have a good reason to value honesty, something like that. We have a good reason. Once we have that, values become moral principles, like don't murder. And then we apply those in our specific situation. An individual applies the general moral principle in a specific situation in their life. Let's assess this a little bit more deeply. First, we've got values. A value is an object or a quality that has worth. Are values real or subjective, we might ask. In other words, is it just somebody's opinion or is it something real about the world? For example, human life is valuable. And then we reflect on the justification. Justification is the reason for believing that value. Do I really have a good reason for this value? Maybe my values are wrong. Maybe they're right. Is it rational? For example, God made it valuable, or it is the best evolution has given. Maybe that's an example of our justification. Why is human life valuable? Why? Why? Did God make it valuable, and that's why? Or perhaps because evolution has gradually, eventually produced human life, and human life is sort of the crown of evolution so far. Maybe that's the case. Who knows, right? What's the justification for why we value human life as opposed to the life of a rock? Why is a human life more valuable than the life of a rock? What's the justification? Once we have that justification, we then reflect on our values, and then our values produce moral principles. A general moral principle, also sometimes just referred to as a moral, is an obligatory precept that preserves or encourages a value. This is necessarily general kind of rule. All right? This asks, how should people usually act in light of the value? For example, don't murder. This is general, right? Abortion is wrong, or maybe abortion is permissible, right? These are just examples. War is wrong for a pacifist, let's say. Or protect the helpless. Protect orphans and widows and children and the poor, right? These are examples, expressions of the value that human life is valuable. So we have human life is valuable, and then we have murder is wrong. But that's still general, because in a particular situation, when I'm trying to apply that moral, I will want to know whether or not this action is murder. Also, we might say that there's lots of disagreements on how to preserve a certain value. For example, human life. Generally, everybody values human life, but is abortion permissible or not? Right? So there will be debates about the justification, the reason for this moral principle. Does this moral principle rightly express that value? You could have a common value and a different moral principle. And one of those is going to be more reasonable than another. As you seek to apply that principle, the application is acting upon a moral principle in a contextually sensitive way that considers circumstantial variables. All things considered, how should I act out my morals in daily life? Right? This means, let's say, honesty, for example. The value is truth. People value truth, and the moral principle that comes from that is that people should tell the truth, generally speaking. But in my specific situation, should I tell the truth? Perhaps I should lie to protect certain people who I'm trying to protect. Or perhaps it's a white lie. I'm throwing a surprise birthday party for a friend. But generally, I tell the truth and I'm honest. All things considered, in this specific concrete situation, how should I act out and apply my general morals? Another example, you overcome bystander effect and rescue the murder victim, right? So again, this is the value that human life is valuable, the moral principle that we should protect the helpless, and then the application that if I hear somebody outside screaming for help, maybe I will overcome bystander effect and go rescue them. Let's talk about the traits of moral principles. First off, they're prescriptive. This means that they tell you what you should do. This is something that is an obligation. It's not just a statement of fact. It's not just saying the sky is blue. It's not just saying that the sky should be blue. It's saying something like a person should take time to smell the roses or whatever. A person should be moral. A person should be humbled. It's prescriptive. It tells you how you should act. Also, it's universal. Morals are applicable to anyone else in a similar situation as you. I don't have a special pass. I don't have a special excuse for why morals don't apply to me. They apply to everyone in relevantly similar kinds of circumstances. Also, morals are overriding. That's to say that I should follow this obligation, this prescription, even when I don't want to. For example, I really want to get an A on this test, and so I'm going to cheat on this exam. That's how I feel. Or I feel lazy. I don't even want to go to school today. I don't want to do my homework. But if something is immoral, it'll override these considerations. I really should go to school. I really should be honest and not cheat. I really should go to work today. I really should fulfill my responsibilities. So I'm going to override my emotions and do the moral thing. Also, they're public. This is to say that the nature of morals is that anyone can understand them. Anyone has access to them just because they're reasonable human beings. And it also means that no one has any private, special access to all of morality. I mean, maybe we have different people who have more wisdom and more learning than others, but by their very nature, morals are public. Everyone can know about them. They're also practicable. This means that the moral that you seek to live by is actually one that you can live by. It's possible to be a humble person. Even if everybody fails in some extent, it's possible to grow in humility and to try to be humble or honest or loving or things like this. It's possible, it's practicable to try to follow the speed limit or follow the traffic laws. But sometimes certain morals are proposed or certain systems of ethics are proposed that are not really livable. We'll cover those throughout the course, and you'll decide if they're practicable or not. Now let's look at the difference between morals, cultural etiquette, and law. What is the relationship between these? Well, morals translate into every culture. They're universal. They're applicable to anyone in a relevantly similar circumstance. It's always wrong to murder, for example. It's always right to love your neighbor. What counts as murder, self-defense, capital punishment, or just war? Those may be debated, but generally speaking, we still say murder is wrong. What counts as murder? Sometimes this is counted as murder. Is self-defense murder? Is war murder? Well, that is a question for later. Ultimately, right now, we just say that murder is wrong. That's a debate partially about morals and partially about cultural application of morals. But how should I love my neighbor in my country, in this country that I'm in right now? In the U.S., you shake hands. In Japan, you bow. When you meet a new person, if someone reaches out their hand in the United States as a gesture of welcome, wanting to shake your hand, and you just stand there and you do not shake their hand, it's considered rude. Universal morals have culturally relevant application. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if hospitality is expressed through bowing or through shaking hands. It doesn't matter. But rudeness does matter. Rudeness is immoral. Generally speaking, we should not be rude, and we should be hospitable, loving our neighbor. So, in this particular context, shaking hands is an expression of the moral. In Japan, bowing is an expression of the same moral. In fact, the only way that we can acknowledge those differences is because we can also acknowledge the similarity. Both places have hospitality, and each place has a different expression of that universal moral. That's etiquette. Etiquette applies the moral obligation in culturally sensitive ways. Now, laws are kind of like etiquette because they apply moral obligation in culturally sensitive ways, and they guide moral obligation in a specific nation. For example, it really doesn't matter whether you drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road. It doesn't matter in and of itself. Considered in itself, there's no reason why we should drive on the right side or the left side. However, if you live in the United States, then you should drive on the right side of the road because this is going to express safety and concern for others and at least your own safety. If you drive on the left side of the road, that's considered dangerous and reckless and immoral. Of course, in the United Kingdom, it's reverse. People drive on the left side. So given a cultural context, the cultural context itself may be totally arbitrary, but the morals that get applied within them are not. We still want to be safe when driving. And that may, in the United States, mean that we need to drive on the right side of the road, and in the UK, we drive on the left side of the road. But both of those differences express the same common moral. So that's the difference between morals, etiquette, and laws. Now there's things that are non-moral or neutral actions that aren't intrinsically moral, like which side of the road should we drive on, or shaking hands versus bowing. That's a non-moral thing considered in itself. But a non-moral becomes moral, all things considered. We want always to distinguish between all things considered, which is the application, and considered in itself. So considered in itself, shaking hands is not moral or immoral. But all things considered, some of those considerations being which country am I in and how is hospitality expressed in this country, once I consider that, then it does become moral. Debates over what is cultural and what is universally moral continue to this day. Some things are difficult to judge. Is that etiquette or is it a universal moral? Something like do not murder, everybody's going to agree with that. That's pretty easy. But what about, let's say, should women be covered head to toe with a garment so that you can only see their eyes? Is this moral or is it immoral? Is it a universal moral or is it not? Is it merely a cultural expression? Because perhaps cultures can be wrong as well. Even in America, we say that our own culture has been wrong in the past. For example, when we had slavery. And even today, we find that our culture has immoral practices that we're trying to get over. The civil rights movement still, in a sense, continues today. We are continuing to try to progress morally as a nation. So we disagree with the culture of our past. Likewise, we disagree with other people's culture when we see suppression going on. An easy one is North Korea, where we have extreme suppression of an entire country's people. Also, China under Mao was incredibly suppressive of its people, and he was tyrannical. There were problems in the culture itself that were causing suppression of people. Also, perhaps in the Asian subcontinent, India, and surrounding nations, there was a practice where when a woman's husband died, the woman was to be burned on the funeral pyre with her husband's body so that she could not continue living after he had died. This was called widow burning, and this was a cultural practice that has now ceased because it was wrong. So in what ways can we critique other cultures, and which ways can we not? Let's talk about types of action. First, of course, we have a right action, and we can also have a wrong action, but it gets more complicated than that. We have, among right actions, we have obligatory actions. These are actions that everyone must do. And then we have optional good actions. Optional permissible. You have things that are neutral. Considered in itself, anyway, it's neutral. Should I give money to the poor person who is begging on the corner? Well, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. But considered in itself, I'm not necessarily obligated to give to every single poor person that I see. Maybe I am, but probably I'm not. Considered in itself. All things considered, maybe I've neglected it long enough and now I really need to, but considered in itself, it's kind of neutral. Or even just, what's your favorite sports team? Something like that. That's neutral, and it's certainly permissible. And then we have supererogatory actions. These are actions that are above and beyond the call of duty. Perhaps we might say generally that people are not required to give 90% of their income to charities. But if you choose to do so, good for you. That's really moral and ethical, and you're going above and beyond the call of duty. I'd like to point out that all of these categories that you see on your screen are debated. We will even cover some philosophers that say there is no right and wrong. Certainly there are philosophers that say there is no such thing as supererogatory because that's the same as obligatory. All things considered, in your situation, maybe you should give 90% of your income to charity. Maybe that universal moral will be applied differently in another person's life, but are there really optional moral things to do? We'll cover that more as the course goes along. Of utmost importance, we need to remember that there's a difference between considering an action in itself and all things considered. So, generally speaking, considered in itself, honesty is the best policy. Patience is a virtue. Things like that. However, all things considered, in my specific situation, right here, right now, should I tell the truth or should I lie? Perhaps there's some extenuating circumstance. Considered in itself, it's good to be hardworking. But all things considered, maybe right now I need to relax, or maybe I need to try harder. Depends on the situation. Let's think about domains of ethical assessment. When we're assessing whether or not something is moral, we want to assess character quality. Is this loving? Is this humble? Is it honest? Things like that. Also, the action itself. Was it the right action or a wrong action? What behavior actually took place? And the consequence. What happened afterwards? And was it a good result or a bad result? How does that reflect on the action, on the moral? And then the motive. You may have the right action, but did you do it out of a good motive? For example, maybe I shake this person's hand because I am trying to deceive them into thinking that I am a nice person, so that eventually, as I gain their trust, I can swindle them out of a lot of money in some business deal or something like that. Or I am lying. A lie is intentionally acting good with a bad motive, trying to deceive someone. So we look at motive. Was it a good motive or bad motive? What about some circumstantial variables? So these domains of ethical assessment, they're helpful considerations, but even better at this point, let's consider circumstantial variables. We want to know who. Am I the right person to do this, or should somebody else have done this? For example, taking flowers to my wife. We ask, who? Well, it's good for me to take flowers to my wife. It probably is not good for you to take flowers to my wife, depending on who you are. Or, it's not good for me to take flowers to somebody other than my wife, let's say. Right? We ask, who? Also, what? Taking flowers to my wife. That's a good thing, but perhaps I could have had a bad thing, a bad behavior considered in itself, right? Killing or something like that. Oh, killing is a good example, actually. Is this the right time to kill or bring flowers to my wife? Perhaps there is some kind of situation in which my wife really wants to buy a certain cooking instrument or utensil, and we don't have a lot of money, so I come home with flowers that cost me $24, and she gets mad at me because this was bad timing. We could have spent that $24 on the thing that she actually wanted. Flowers are going to die by tomorrow, right? So, bad timing. Where? Is this the right place to do this or not? So, if I'm taking my wife flowers and let's say she is at work or I should be at work or something like that, perhaps that's the wrong place. Perhaps I should wait until she gets home first. Where? Is this the right place to do this thing? And why? Am I giving my wife flowers because I love her so much and I can't help myself? Or am I giving her flowers just because I feel a sense of obligation and I really don't want to, and I'm really just trying to butter her up so that I can ask her if I can go hang out with the guys this evening, even though she would really like to spend time with me, right? What's my motive? Why? What about how? How did I do this thing? Did I present her with flowers in a very kind and gentle and tender, loving kind of way? Or did I just kind of throw them on the table and say, here's some flowers? How affects the moral of the ethical value of what I am doing? And then also with what? With what instrument, this is, so to speak, with what means? How did I go about doing this? Now, if I bought her flowers with my own money, that's good. But if I went out and stole some money and then bought her flowers, that's bad. We also want to think about the essence versus an accidental quality of an action. This is to investigate why. Why is the most important aspect, the most important circumstantial variable of what I'm doing, the motive and the goal that I'm after. Let's take an example. Let's say I want to drive to work. This is my purpose. This is my goal. This is why I get in my car and I start driving. And this is the This is the essence of my action. Why am I acting? The essence of my action is an answer to that question. Why did I get in the car? To go drive to work, because I want to get to work. But other circumstantial things could happen along the way. I drive off to work and bang, I crash into a car. I was not intending to crash into a car. This was an accident. The essence of my choice was choosing to go to work. I did not choose to have a car accident. This is why it's called a car accident. Because whether or not it happened, the essence of my choice was the same. I chose to go to work. And an unnecessary variable was added on to the circumstance. All right? Or perhaps, if I go on the freeway or I take surface streets, my goal is still to get to work. But it really doesn't matter which route I take. That's an accidental quality of the choice. If I choose to give flowers to my wife, that's the main description of what it is that I'm doing. Now, whether or not I get 24 flowers or 25 flowers, or whether the flowers are red or white, whether they are roses or tulips, that's an accidental quality. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to the essence of what the action is. In other words, these accidental qualities can change and my action remains the same. So if I get her roses, I'm still giving her flowers. If I give her tulips, I'm still giving her flowers. The essence is the same. If I give her a potted plant versus a plant that is already cut off, it's still giving her flowers. Or if I'm on my way to work and I take surface streets, I'm still going to work. If I take the freeway, I'm still going to work. If I get in a car accident, I still chose to go to work anyway. The essence of my choice is the same. We might talk about Aristotle's four causes. This is easiest to think of in terms of an object, and we'll show how it applies to a moral action. We have the final cause, which is why. Why was this building constructed? Well, it's constructed because a school was being founded, right? The goal is to create a school. That's the final cause. The formal cause. What is a school? Well, school is teachers and students coming together to learn from each other. The efficient cause. Well, teachers and students have to actually attend classes. Teaching and instruction, lectures go on, administration happens, things like that. This is how. What is the source of change? And then material cause. What is it made of? The school is made of people, for example. Now let's think of a moral choice. The most important ones are the final cause and the efficient cause. The final cause, or why, is the goal that I'm after, the thing that's actually chosen. I chose to go to work. I chose to give my wife flowers. And then the efficient cause. Who and how? Well, I'm the right person to go to work because I've got a job. I'm the right person to give my wife flowers because I'm her husband. And also, the act of going out to the store and buying flowers or getting in my car and driving to work, this is part of the choice and part of the moral quality of what we are investigating. We might also look at Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development. We all start off with pre-conventional morality. The first stage in this category is that we think about punishment avoidance and obedience. We do the right thing only to avoid punishment. And then we might gradually grow into the second stage where we do the right thing in an exchange of favors. You do this for me and I'll do that for you. And then the next category is conventional morality. we grow to the third stage where we do the right thing because we actually want to please others. I'm not just getting flowers for my wife so that she can get me something in return. I'm just getting flowers for my wife because I want to please her. And then law and order. Gradually we realize that we need to keep morals just to keep society functioning. It's a team effort to follow the morals. The last category is post-conventional morality, where stage 5 is a social contract. We keep laws because we want to keep society running, okay? Law and order in stage 4 is to say that we learn rules from society, but now we realize that they're essential to the functioning of society. But lastly, and ultimately, we want to get to the stage where we think about morals as universal ethical principles. In other words, even if culture says otherwise, I'm going to do the right thing. Even if everybody says that I should do something different, I'm going to do the right thing. So, for example, the civil rights movement. Even though there were many people expressing civil disobedience to the laws, they were disobeying the laws, they were doing so on moral grounds. Sometimes the right thing to do is illegal. And maybe you will be able to change the laws if enough people come on board with you and actually create a movement like the civil rights movement, right? Something like that. Universal ethical principles means that you do something moral just because it's moral, just for that reason alone, not for some consequence or any other reason, but you do the right thing just because it's the right thing. Now here's some criticisms of this model. Some people have said that there's too much of an emphasis on justice at the exclusion of other values. Some have said that moral growth is usually not linear. These are 6 stages here, and maybe some people develop them in a different order, or whatever the case is. Also, these are not culturally neutral, some people have said. These lean towards individualism instead of communitarianism. This model may make sense, for example, in a Western nation, something like the United States, but it may not be as applicable in some societies that emphasize community a lot more. Depends. It all depends on the nature of morality. Some have said that it's just too simplistic, and it does not explain inconsistent moral thinking, right? Someone may think about universal ethical principles, but neglect law and order, or neglect pleasing others. Who knows what the case might be? Some people think inconsistently. In fact, we all think inconsistently at different times. Also, this does not adequately address the origin of evil. Where does evil come from? Is evil simply a lack of maturity and a lack of growth? Maybe sometimes it is, but maybe sometimes it isn't. Maybe there's another source for evil. Whether these criticisms hold or not, at least this is still a handy tool for calling attention to the process of moral growth. Whatever the case is, even if moral growth doesn't look exactly like this, even if it's not linear, even if it's not 6 stages designed by Kohlberg, it's still the case that we can grow morally. Now let's think about the taxonomy of philosophy, specifically in regards to ethics. So we've talked before in the What is Philosophy video about the taxonomy of philosophy, but let's give a quick overview so we can specifically talk about ethics. We have metaphysics, which comes from the Greek meta and physica, which means beyond or after physics. That's the study of reality. That's the first branch of philosophy. And it has many other sub-branches: ontology, cosmology, theology, anthropology, philosophy of nature, and other things. And then we have epistemology, which is the study of knowledge. Episteme means knowledge in Greek. Epistemology has other branches as well. It investigating truth and belief and justification and logic. It inquires about the nature of truth and knowledge. The last branch of philosophy is axiology, which is the study of value. And it is divided into ethics and aesthetics. Aesthetics is just the study of beauty and art. What is beauty? What is art? But ethics, as we're studying now, ethics is divided first into metaethics, which asks, are values and morals discovered or created? Do good and evil exist? What is their nature? Are morals objective or relative? What creates moral responsibility for an action? Is morality essentially about character, consequences, duty, or something else? Then we have normative ethics. Based on the answers to the questions of metaethics, we develop normative systems. Normative means action guiding. Based on our metaethic, what are the right moral principles or rules? How do these principles relate to each other? What systems should we develop to organize these principles? There's three main normative theories. Virtue ethics emphasizes character. Something is moral if it rightly expresses a certain character quality called virtue, like love, or peace, or humility. Deontology emphasizes duty. Something is moral if it fulfills and accomplishes a duty or a rule. And then consequentialism says that something is right if it achieves the right goal or the right consequences, the right reward. And then we have applied ethics. How do we apply these general moral principles and this general system of ethics to specific situations? And then we have descriptive ethics. Descriptive ethics is simply a way to describe different ethical systems, perhaps comparing different philosophers, or comparing different cultures, or comparing different people groups, whatever the case is. This is just to describe the ethics of a particular person or group of people. Let's talk about religion a little bit. Louis Pojman says, since religion is founded not on reason but on revelation, you cannot use reason to convince someone from another religion that your view is the right one. Now, there's some problems with this. Religion is important because, first of all, we're talking about religion, is important because when we ask, does God exist? This is the most important question that influences our answer to every other question, especially ethical questions. We need to understand religious philosophy adequately, whether or not you actually agree with it, whether or not you're actually religious. Pojman is generally a great guy. He is generally on the ball, but he's wrong here. There's a misconception that belief and reason are opposites. Because remember, knowledge is justified true belief. So a belief is just an opinion or a claim. I claim that this is the case. I claim that this religion is right. I claim that God exists, whatever the case is. Now, just because there's an opinion doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. And you may be right without knowing why. If you're right without knowing why, then you have a true belief or a true opinion, but no justification. What we want in order to have knowledge is we want not only to have opinions, but we want to make sure that our opinions are true, and we make sure by figuring out whether or not they're justified. Does the justification for this belief better than the justification for somebody else's belief? Who has better justification? A belief can be right or wrong. It's like an opinion. If it's false, you're only right by coincidence. You didn't really know it. If it's true and you have good reason to believe it, then it's knowledge. An opinion, a claim, or a belief is true if it rightly describes reality. That's the definition of truth. Something is true if it rightly describes reality. Let's talk about fideism versus foundationalism to talk about religion. Fideism is saying that faith does not require reason. Foundationalism says that faith depends on reason. Religious people disagree, even sometimes within a particular religion. Most of the philosophers through history have been religious, and most base their belief on reason. We are indebted to them for developing the fields of philosophy, science, and every other field of study. Watch some videos by some religious philosophers, perhaps in my own playlist for this class, to see how they present their beliefs philosophically. Whether or not you are religious, it's crucial to understand someone's claims accurately so that our response is as rational as possible. So this is all to say that some religious people say that they have very good reasons for their belief, and that their belief is built on reasons. And perhaps they would say that non-religious people do not have a good enough reason, or that they have less rational reason. That is a possibility. So fideism would say instead that belief is completely different than reason, and reason has no comment on belief. But most of the philosophers, especially the philosophers that we will discuss in this class, were foundationalist. They were religious, and they had reasons for their religion. So reason and belief are not opposites. Now let's do the write-up. Why I study ethics. How will studying ethics benefit you? Again, write these down, answer the questions, and submit them online. What are the main reasons we should study ethics that were listed in this video? Go back and watch if you forgot. Explain a time that you exhibited the bystander effect. What can you do differently? List 5 morals that are universal, even if they are expressed in a slightly different way in different cultures. Do you think we are all obligated to do the supererogatory? What do you think is the relationship between religion and reason? That's it for this video. Next, I think you should go watch the video on relativism versus objectivism.